I'm Jordan Stone from The Good Ride, and I'm going to ask the big question. Are unisex boards the new frontier for women, or are they just pinking and shrinking men's boards? We're going to find out. 2026. Today I have the Singular from Amplid. Very excited to get on this board. I've never had an opportunity to ride Amplid. I got this out in multiple days, about 3+ days, on a variety of conditions, between perfect groomed to packed out powder to actually getting it on a deep powder day, Pacific Northwest powder day. I rode this with the small Condas and the actual men's dialogue boot in a size 7. I was able to get onto a 148 in the Singular. This is a unisex board. They have an extended size range between a 144 all the way up to a 166. The 148 accommodates about a women's size 9 is the ideal foot size for this one, but that size range accommodates all the way up to a 200-pound person. The weight range they recommend for the 148 is right in my weight range. It's between 99 pounds and 143, actually. I'm about 130 to 135 and 5'6", so this is really within the sizes that I like. I even tend to go slightly bigger. So pros of the Singular Amplid. This is a very damp board. It felt super secure on the snow. It charges through almost every terrain that I threw at it, and it has a really great quick heel to toe initiation. Cons. I found that it was a little tricky to turn and to control in steeper, more tight terrain. The weight on the board always kind of felt slightly forward, even though it is a directional board. That took some adapting, especially in powder conditions. And the rider's weight, I found, again, as a female perspective, the rider's weight seemed to really play a part on how the board controlled. So where the rider's weight was on the board and your style of riding on the board seemed to really play a part in how this turned and how it was controlled. So the shape is a slightly tapered directional shape. If you look at it here, it looks like we're seeing a lot of things, but I would say a lot of this is going to be aesthetic. There is a very mild taper from the nose to the tail, giving it a little bit of that drop seat we'll talk about more in the powder conditions. So the camber profile in the Singular is almost a full tip to tail camber. If you take a look here, you can see that camber starts right about here in the nose. There's a slight early rise, and then it continues all the way back almost to your tail, almost to that little line here you're gonna see. It does feel like a full camber board, even with the slight setback stance, slight setback on board here. It feels like a full camber board. So it is a directional board, but it does feel pretty centered when riding. In fact, I almost felt slightly forward on this board. So one thing I did notice regarding this camber profile and just the on-snow feel was that when at lower speeds, I had a harder time actually flexing through this camber. It definitely required speeds and required force that only comes from a skilled rider. As a result, I'd recommend this board for intermediate to advanced riders, people that are comfortable with camber profile or have a little bit more weight on them and can really flex this board as needed to get that full effective edge. So I rode this board in 2 different stance settings. I always try to do something at reference or as closest to reference. My preferred stance width is 19 inches. So reference on this was about 19.25. Rode this at reference, and then when I got into powder conditions, I actually set this all the way back to their powder pack. Reference, this is a 1-inch setback from center. If you set this stance all the way back to their powder pack setback, it does extend that reference stance to 20.5. However, it increases it to 2.125 setback from center. When transferring this board onto groomed trails and more maintained terrain, I was actually pleasantly surprised by the edge hold. It was definitely acceptable given that there is no edge disruption on this board. It's just the standard progressive side cut. I was able to feel locked in on longer radius turns, but also able to initiate some tighter radius turns A lot of that was dictated more by the amount of force and speed that I came into it and how I was able to flex the board. The edge hold was challenged, again, for me, when we got into tighter terrain, when I got into terrain like tight trees and bumped out, actually like moguled terrain, I wasn't able to flex this board and really use that effective edge. And so the edge hold kind of fell out for me. I think this is related to my body weight and the fact that I'm a woman and I'm smaller. You're not going to see this as much if you are heavier or if you're somebody who's a little bit taller, has more force behind them. So the flex of the singular here, you're going to see in the tail, it's about a mid-stiff. Definitely going to take some to manipulate. Let's see here in the nose. Again, a longer nose here, more material. Definitely going to have a little bit more flex throughout that nose, through the entire board, medium flex. What's really nice about this is it's going to have that amazing rebound that I talked about in the park setting and jump setting. The other thing you're going to notice with this board, whatever the secret ingredient that they do to this board, feels super, super damp. It's going to give you a really close to ground feeling. Now, an interesting differentiation between a freeride board and an all mountain board is its ability to go switch into jumps, into pipes, and to be jibby. I definitely think that this board is an all mountain board. A lot of fun to ride switch, even though it was slightly forward. When I turned around and rode switch, felt pretty comfortable and stable against the ground. Turned well, didn't have any issues or resistance against that. Has amazing feedback and pop. This board, all the force that you put into comes back tenfold, and actually surprised me quite a few times with how much higher I popped off of jumps than I was expecting. That long effective edge, that's stable, is going to be really fun inside of a pipe. Love to get this into a pipe if we had one. The one place that may be limited would be jibby scenario. This could be buttered if you have enough weight to manipulate that camber. Not really going to be something you're going to want to take on boxes and rails. You'd want to go a little bit softer for something along those lines. So the singular has a side cut radius of 7.2, which is actually a pretty tight radius. However, it appears to me like there might be a mild taper from the front of the board to the back of the board. This made that turning experience unique. It really shined when I was doing open terrain, areas where I could really kind of put some speed in this and apply some pressure. It did wonderful long radius turns. It was definitely challenged in tighter terrain. There is basalt and carbon stringers running the length of this board and actually throughout the tail and nose. This could contribute a little bit to that rebound and that stiffness of the board. Again, sizing down in the board or even just being slightly heavier than their recommended weight range will change this. Now, one thing I noticed and actually got feedback from other female riders on this board, just to confirm what I was noticing, where I was on the board definitely changed how well the edge hold and how well this board turned. This is a little bit different than the perspective I've heard from some male riders and even from our Good Ride review of this. As a female rider, and I had 2 other female riders ride this, being slightly back on this board and actually setting your weight slightly back in the turns made the turning experience much, much better. Because the weight always felt slightly forward on this, when you went to initiate the turn in the front, the back end would actually kind of slide out a little bit. Just be prepared if you are a female rider getting on the singular that you may want to adjust and set back a little bit if you're really looking for a carvy turning experience. So the singular does have a centered base. Beautiful pink color here too, gotta love that. We were given this board a factory setting, so factory wax. The first day that I got on it, I rode it just as is. For the powder day, I did apply a little bit of rub-on wax. I did not notice a difference in the base glide between factory settings and just a rub-on wax. Not the greatest base I've ever experienced, but pretty acceptable. Given that centered base, regular tunings, weather-specific waxes is only going to improve an already pretty proficient base glide. So in powder conditions, I did set this all the way back to that powder pack stance. It did increase my reference stance to 20.5, which is a little outside of my preferred stance, but I wanted to give this board the best chance on a deep, actually really deep Pacific Northwest powder day. It has decent float considering that low taper and that kind of mild setback. The base glide and the dampness of this board really allowed it to charge through all of that packed out terrain. It really allowed me to keep up my speed so that I could do some really fun slashes and enjoy my time on some deep snow conditions on not super steep terrain. However, even though I was set all the way back on this board, it still felt forward. Great for an all mountain board. Definitely not a powder specific board, but it'll do good for an all mountain board. Now the interesting thing about that powder pack stance, and I'll show you this right here, unique to this brand is that they actually only have it on the back here. So as the front is going to have your 10-hole pattern and stops here, this powder pack insert is extended back. It's just not reciprocated on that front foot. If they added those extras, I'd be curious to see if the sensation mimicked a little bit more of a powder board, if it allowed that nose to lift and that tail to drop, but we won't know. Overall, the Singular from Amplid is a great look into what unisex boards can offer for female riders. It's fast, it's fun, it holds an edge. It's definitely going to be something that the female chargers are going to enjoy riding. It has the capabilities to ride in most terrain, off-piste, on-groomed, as well as some moderate powder days. Now, it's not the most perfect powder board, but again, for an all-mountain board, it's going to do everything. Well, where I ran into issues is the ability to really manipulate that and flex that camber profile at slower speeds, given my weight, given my stature. This became really obvious in tight trees and in bumped out kind of moguled conditions. If you're a female rider who's looking at this board or considering this board as your one board quiver, consider either sizing down and getting something that maybe you're at the top end of that weight range, or just being prepared for this sport to be something that you're going to do more at speeds. It's going to feel better in control when you are at speeds. If you enjoyed this, like, subscribe.
You don't even
tell
have to
me
say
that you like me.
We're just going to put it up.
Just, pat me on the back. Tell me I'm good.